Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight on the TEPSA Facebook page. My name is Todd Nesloni. I'm the Director of Culture and Strategic Leadership here at the Texas Elementary Principals and Supervisors Association. We are thrilled this afternoon, evening time, to bring you a special chat with Mary Margaret Wilson called Living, Working, and Parenting in Times of Trauma and Quarantine. Mary Margaret, I am so thrilled to have you here today. Can you tell everybody a little bit about who you are?
Thank you, Todd. It's an honor to be here, and hopefully the words that I'm going to share today are, as I just told Todd, is going to be just speaking from my heart. A little bit about me. I have been in the business of education since I was 20 years old, so over 46 years, and I've served in a lot of roles. I have been a teacher, I have been a coach, I've been an administrator, I've been a parent engagement coordinator, I've been assistant director for a large Head Start grant in a service center. So I've done a lot of different roles in education. For the past 10 years, I've been an early childhood education consultant working directly for Region 6 Head Start, which is working with children and families in poverty across mostly in Texas, but in some in other states. But I am specifically focused on really addressing a lot of social emotional learning through being a conscious discipline certified instructor. It's a lot of the coaching and work that I do, amongst some other things, but it ends up being the majority of the time that I'm spending as a consultant helping teachers, helping administrators. So that's
Well, Mary
basically.
Margaret, over here at TEPSA, we are big fans of yours. So I'm
Thank you.
thrilled that you joined us tonight. And we just want to tell everybody who may be watching right now, please feel free at any point during tonight's chat to add any questions along
Yes.
in the comments. And we'd love to address those and provide some more insight. And so as we get started here, you, like the rest of us, are going through this quarantine time, this new life of being locked down in our homes and these changes to our daily schedule. How have these times affected you personally?
So for me personally, March 6th, I was going to get my grandchildren, and it was their spring break. So I went from that joyful week of having my grandchildren down to when I was about to take them back. I had a training that I was doing outside of Austin, and I was getting a little anxious because school districts were shutting down, and my daughter's a healthcare worker. And I told my son-in-law, you really need to let them stay with me. I just intuitively think they need to stay with us. And so thank God they said yes. And I will tell you, the next day, my daughter had a patient that was infected, and she didn't have a mask. And so first of all, and most of all, I'm a parent. And that was a highly anxious thing for me. And I thought the best thing I can do is care for her children. So it went from spring break to, I still have them, from being a grandparent. And my husband and I love being grandparents. We had to shift roles down to being a teacher again. And we've been through a lot, but I will say that we've been through a lot with each other, and we have space. I live out in the country, so it's not that I'm worried about not being able to breathe and get out. In fact, that's been the blessing that we've been able to get out. But deep down inside is the anxiety of it's a lot of anxiety just thinking about what if something happens to their parents? What if and even though I know how to pull myself to a better state, the overwhelmingness of it really has affected me from things like not sleeping. And I'm a very good sleeper. Just getting up in the middle of the night, just going, whoa. And knowing and catching myself saying and doing things that I know different and I know better. But it was just, it's just the overwhelming of the anxiety and the stress and trauma.
Well, and I think a lot of people can probably relate to that right now, whether it is just the not knowing about their job or health-wise, or even, like you said, taking in your grandkids during this time because their mother is a healthcare worker. And so there's so many variables at play here. But, sometimes people can hear the word trauma and think they kind of understand it because it's been a popular buzzword right now.
It's a
and so how
buzzword.
would you define trauma for those listening?
So I'm going to go back, and I want to say just a little bit, because I really think trauma's different for everybody. So if you go back, it's really actually an epidemic in our society.
Mhm.
So what research says is an estimated 70% of all people in the United States have experienced trauma at some
Wow.
point in their lives. 70%. And so that's translating that into 224 million hurting children and adults in our
Mhm.
society before all of this.
Yeah.
And so before we can really actually heal ourselves, can bring healing to ourselves and our friends and our families, we actually have to seek first to check in with ourselves, what
Mhm.
triggers us. And I think that during this time, what one of my concerns and one of my worries are, I have skills, I have resources. I'm wondering about parents that are doing the best they can
Mhm.
and not really aware of what their triggers are. I'm just wondering and worrying about that, but the overwhelmingness of wondering if they're going to keep a job to
Mhm.
be able to even feed their
Yeah.
children. Number two, homeschooling, and teachers have done a really good job on the most part about providing those online resources. Some of them a little overzealous, I'll just be honest with you. And then parents not being able to discern what is optional and what is
Mhm.
necessary for these children to be doing right now. And um, it really took me a couple of weeks to deal with all of the
Yeah.
passwords and the apps and all. But I'm going to go back to your question about what trauma is. So one of the things that we know about trauma is there's really just two different kinds of trauma. One's traumatic experiences, maybe a traumatic experience that's
Right.
happened, which we've all probably either lived, but if you've lived long enough, you've had some of this,
Right.
or it's either or that it's something that happens in a more complex way, where it's more than just one traumatic event,
Mhm.
and that really affects the way that it really affects health. Number one, our physical
Yeah.
health, because the body doesn't need the cognitive memory to be able to say, oh, I remember exactly what happened and what it did to me. It's really that part of the brain shuts down and the body starts remembering it, the
Mhm.
parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous systems, and which really causes a lot of health issues. And so I think we need to be mindful of that
Mhm.
during this time, because I don't know. Some parents, they may be small business owners. I don't
Mhm.
know what it is that people are doing, but understanding that we have to take a deep breath and realize the moment is as it is, and to be able to find out how to navigate through it without being so overwhelmed and doing things like not sleeping,
Mhm.
not eating right, being too hard on yourself, and then being too hard on people around you. Uh,
Yeah, and and I think even in the examples that you've shared, I mean, I even think of we have so many parents who are essential workers who are
yes,
maybe going into the grocery store because they have to work there every day, or
yes.
driving a bus, or the things we see on the news, or even like you said, even your own daughter having the healthcare workers as a parent who may not have somebody else in the family that can watch their kids or anything like
Mhm.
that. And so, what advice would you have for those who are trying to work and parent during these times?
First of all, if I just had to have one suggestion for you, it's take a deep breath
Mhm.
and focus on what has to be done.
Right.
Not the overwhelmingness of what it may come across online learning for children, or what you think you have to do at work to be an impeccable worker, or whatever it is that's in your mind's eye. It's the focus on what has to be done in the moment. And it really took me a while, even though with the skills, I thought, oh my gosh, I have to have a visual routine.
Mhm.
And so, I lived by my calendar, and all of a sudden, nobody's getting dressed. We're hanging out in our pajamas all day long, and I don't even know what day it is. So, one of the things that calmed down that feeling inside of me, and I would hope for parents as well that feel like it's trying to juggle so much, is having a visual routine and talking through it,
Mhm.
putting it in a place where everybody can see it. This is where we are in the day. And if
Yeah.
it's a time when you as parents need to be able to do something that's due, and they had to concentrate and say, this is sacred space for me. I
Mhm.
need everybody to be out of this room during this
Mhm.
amount of time, and then we'll get back together, or go
Yeah.
outside and we'll go back together. But having that visual routine really helped me to synergize myself again, so I could
Mhm.
think clearly again and plan and prioritize, and help others. But until I did that, I was really going through the motions without being present.
Well, and you and I had chatted about this before we went on live today, and that was something I had never considered, because I know we hear so much conversation about creating some structure, creating some routine, and I think as adults, we kind of take that for advantage because of how developed we are with understanding routines, but our kids aren't always that way. And so that idea of having that very visual representation of the parts of your day, I could see how that would make such a difference, not only for you, but for the kids.
So it's and really so much for adults. My husband said to me the other day, and we've been married for 45 years. He said, I just feel like mush. That's what he said. And I said, you know what? You need a visual routine too, because his job is recess. Let me just say it. And the kids outside so I can get ready for the next part of the day. I said, you need a visual routine too. All of this is not just for the kids. This keeps me structured and focused. And so he said, I think you're right. And so he did one too. I mean, it looks a little different than the kids, but the it's not. I had to have the structure for the day, and I call it structured freedom. So we all knew what the day would typically look like. But if something else came up, we had to say it's going to shift here because something came up. And then for each child, I have an individual plan for them because they know what their day was going to like. But within that day, what's their responsibility? And I had to do the same thing for me as well, because the days and nights were mushing together, and it was it was too much.
Well, and I think a lot of people listening right now can probably really resonate with that, how it all just blends together. When we are going to a school every day or going to a job, it was easy to keep track of. Well, even then we lost track of what day it was sometimes. But now just that monotony, I think, can kind of get to you. And, the other thing that I'm thinking of as you're talking about this is, our own mental health as adults.
Yes. How
How can we maintain our own mental health so that we can be as available as possible for our children?
So it's always about shifting your perspective as adults. We have to shift our perspective. And I kept saying the blessing in this is I have time and I have the skills to be able to offer my best to my grandchildren who live 5 hours away. And I had told my daughter not too long ago, I just wish I had them a little bit because I can see what they need and I can't help. And so she said, your wishes come true. And so I've been thinking to myself, I have this. I have to seize the moment in this of being something that when they leave here, that they go, oh my gosh, this is what happened for me. Yeah. So I can see in 2 months, I can see a significant difference in my grandson who is, there's some things that he did very well, and there are some things he just had to have it broken down, and one adult to be able to pay attuned attention. Yeah. And the other thing is we ended up with the kids. I told them we start each day with what we're grateful for, and we end each day with what we're grateful for. And then doing a lot of noticing when we go outside. My husband will say things like, I want y'all to be still and listen. So nature heals. We know that nature heals. Yeah. And he said, everyone has to stop talking and listen. Well, I live out in the country and you can hear a lot of things. and there's a very healing power to nature. And I'm thinking that when we all have maybe a little bit of space someplace where we can stop the environmental noise, the noise in our head, and connect with what's soothing to the soul. And sometimes it's being still.
And I think that's so important because when I'm reflecting on even my own moments of when it just feels overwhelming or there's just so many thoughts going through my head, just sitting on my back porch in a chair with not any plan, no book, no nothing, just relaxing and taking in the sounds and the scents, that is a very calming thing. And I think, like you said, no matter where you are, even if that is just going for a walk down the block or just having those moments where you can just sit and reflect, I think they're powerful when you do that out in nature. And so, go ahead.
I was going to say, so I think sometimes we as our society, in our society, in our culture, we think busyness is equals to success. But the truth of the matter is I'm hoping that this slows us down. I'm hoping that as a culture, this slows us down to be able to see people. I'm hoping as an education community, this slows us down to be able to see children, not just worry about the test. I can't tell you how many teachers were relieved about that. I can't tell you that children that were relieved about that.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I'm wondering why it has to come to this for us to be able to see children, not just curriculum, but children. And so
And I
hoping that's
think that that's an excellent point, and I think you're exactly right. I think this has forced a lot of people to reflect on that exam or maybe their curriculum very specifically over what it could have been doing to our kids. And so,
Mhm.
you're working with your own grandkids during this time, and so we have a lot of parents who are a lot of them are educators who are trying
Yes.
to teach their students but also teach their new students, their own children at the same time. Do you have any advice you would give for them? I mean, I know we talked about the visual schedule, and that's great
Mhm.
too, but anything else specifically for working with teaching your own kids at home?
So teaching your grandchildren is equal to teaching your own children, and a little bit harder because when they come to us, it's like Disneyland.
Uh-huh.
So the one thing is we need to be gentle with our own, and we need to be able to say when during this, that goes back to during this time we're learning together. This is the building that we're learning in
Mhm.
right now, and so during this amount of time we're going to focus on this. The thing that I can have found to be so hard are all the distractions that are in home. You think there's a lot of distractions in school, but there's a lot of distractions at home. And to be able to keep it simple, we don't have to we don't have to make it so complex.
Right.
These children can learn things in natural environments that we wished we had in schools a lot of times, like opportunities to cook or to sew or to do things outside that you really can't do. And the other part for parents that are listening, it is the one time when your child is going to get a lot of one-on-one.
Mhm.
And we need to seize that as being helpful to our children and asking questions and really hearing how they process and how they think. I started really doing the math to think about how much actual time our grandchildren were getting at school with the best intended teacher and
Mhm.
how much time even actually just to listen to them read. So parents, you have that time now
Mhm.
that children will not get in school,
Yeah.
even if you are a teacher, because you can hear them read. You can actually spend some one-on-one time with them.
And I love that so much about how, you have this time right now that like you just said, you can sit and listen and hear how your kids are communicating, hear how they're doing basic things, and really dive into that and develop that as well. And so I love to, I know I see Belinda Neal's watching, and I see she made a comment of, if you could dive a little bit more into the scheduling, because like Belinda says in the comments, it's going to look different sometimes for every kid,
Mhm. Yep.
especially when you may be a parent at home with a 16-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 2-year-old. Your
Mhm.
schedules are obviously going to look different for those kids. Where did you even begin to create that schedule? Like, what was the foundational piece?
Balance. The foundational piece was structure first things first. And so I had to balance the time that with one child that might have needed a little bit more to
Mhm.
the other child that could do some things independently. The
Yeah.
other thing that I haven't mentioned yet that is really important is to put children in service to one another. If you have more than one
Mhm.
child, we have to put children in service to one another. And so one of the things that we do in a healthy biological family is that we offer our what's intradependence. We offer our services to one another without a reward, a sticker, a
Mhm.
surprise, or anything for doing it. And when we do that, we build skills with each. We build skills, and so knowing how to create the schedule came from which child I knew needed more one-on-one,
Mhm.
and so that's where I figured it out. Some of it was from the online learning that was coming up because there was so much stuff that was
Yeah.
uh, looked like it was optional, but it was hard to decipher between what was really
Mhm.
optional, and what was it that they really needed from children. And I actually called their teachers and said, "Tell me the bottom line of what you are looking
Yes.
at." And so when I did, I had to make that call because when I saw all of that, I'm just a little overzealous myself. I thought, so they have to do all of this. They don't
Mhm.
have to do every little thing. Some of the things that children are doing are practice. And if a
Yeah.
child already has it, that means they don't need to do it. That
Mhm.
means that they can spend time on more important things. So that's how I balanced it. The first things first. And so, because for instance, I knew that these children were bathed in art, science, and music, I told their parents what we're doing is reading, math,
Right.
reading and writing and math. And I said, I bring it all together with experiences. So um, the schedule is balanced, and I won't say there haven't been struggles between I don't want to do this, I want to do that. There's been a lot of that. And I had to shift my role using my big voice saying, some things are not optional.
Yeah.
This is your job. And when you're through, then you can do those things. And so there was a lot of pushback. I'm not saying it was easy. This has probably been one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I want that on record. Because knowing what children need and knowing what's happening right now, and the amount of time that I had with them, it was really hard to shift those roles. Being from having some time to really think and having alone time down to meals, laundry, and meals. They're here for every one of them, and the cleaning and all that came up. And so we have chores to do.
Right.
And that really mattered. And that's written into our schedule. That's one of the first things we say is, did you make your bed? So.
Well, and I think that's so important. Something else you said in there too about making sure that you know what the bottom line is, what needs to be accomplished to reach whatever goals you're trying to, and start with that. And maybe, like you said, that means the person reaching out to the teacher and saying, just tell me what you have to have for me, because right now I may be drowning in this, or this, and I just need to know what the bottom line is. And I think, when we've got kids coming from all sorts of homes, parents really have that opportunity to be their advocate right now, not only for themselves as parents, but also for their kids, and saying, you know what, I am still having to go in. I'm an essential worker. I don't have a spouse who lives at home. It's just me and the kids. This is the schedule we're going to have to do. This is what we're going to have to work with. And knowing that that's okay to do that, right?
It is okay. So when it is really okay. And teachers really want to know and want to help. Right now, they're working hard to put out what needs to be taught. Right. But on the other end, they don't have the children. So a phone call to a teacher or a text to a teacher right now, and them being able to offer you that information is like a pot of gold. That shifted things for us.
Well, Mary Margaret, has there been anything that you've learned unexpectedly during this time of quarantine?
Oh, yes. I've learned a lot. My husband says my famous quote is going to be, this is a virus, not a famine, because what happened with all the stress. And we both grew up with parents that grew up during the Depression. So it goes back to don't waste a thing. And I kept telling him, we have plenty. This is not going backwards in time. This is going back to shifting things a little bit. And so he keeps laughing when I say that, because he has overplanted the garden. I keep ordering online things, thinking things are going to run out, and that's not true. This is temporary trauma. It's not permanent. There's going to be some residual from this, but the hopefulness from this is that we're going to learn from this and do things differently. Is what my hope is.
And I completely agree. I think, as we enter the fall and whatever that may look like, I think these things are things that as educators, we're going to have to take into consideration as we plan things for the fall. As parents, we're going to have to take these things into consideration as our kids begin to go back to school buildings and whatever education may look like when it comes to that. And so, closing out today, Mary Margaret, if we have parents in here who might be listening who are not an educator, they've never gone to school to be an educator, what advice would you give for them during these times when they really do want to help their kids and they're trying, but they don't even know how to help with what's being given to them from the teacher? So
my hope from all of this, and I was sharing this with my grandson's teacher yesterday, who, by the way, needs to be Teacher of the Year. Honestly, I've never seen a dedicated teacher so much. I've shared that with her. I said, my granddaughter should have a right to have you too. So what I told her, that my hope is that we're going to move from saying that we have parents as partners to having parents as partners. Right. And the most important thing is that parents know more about their children and about many things than teachers do. And we need to trust ourselves as parents, and teachers need to embrace parents. And then we've got to figure out a way to partner differently besides just sending home, general information that doesn't really help parents know what to do. with children. We need to figure out how to bring parents in, not so much a million meetings because they're busy, but to bring them into the conversation in a very intentional way. What are the goals for children? What does it look like, sound like, and feel like for your child? How do they learn? And how can we do it? Not just offering a prescription of what they need to do. It's how are we going to do it? Because without that, we're going to keep getting the same results in education. We have to have parents, and they have to be engaged, not involved. It's not just donuts for dads and muffins for moms. It's about parents as part. So I'm hoping that's the biggest result from all of this, because I think some parents are seeing that their children know more than are a little ahead, and they're kind of doing busy work, and some are seeing that their children are not able to do any of this without help. So we've got to be able to close that gap a lot differently.
Well, Mary Margaret, I love the wisdom you bring to this, and I know that in the in the title of this presentation, we've also linked to an article, to some links that give you information on how to support kids dealing with trauma. So if you are a parent or teacher listening now, Mary Margaret has provided that for us as well, so we can have some more information about working with kids with trauma. But I know you are doing fantastic work. Thank you for everything you're doing. I know here at TEPSA, like I said, we love you and your work, and I know that your grandkids are really enjoying this extra time with you right now. So I appreciate you coming and sharing some of your wisdom with our viewership today.
Thank you. It's been an honor. Thank you very much, Todd.